In December 1989, a Belgian man named Eddie Willems sat down at his office computer, slid in a floppy disk that had arrived in the morning mail, and unknowingly became the first known victim of the most lucrative criminal industry of the 21st century. The disk was labeled AIDS Information Introductory Diskette. It looked like a public health questionnaire. It was not. Within days, his files were locked. A message on the screen demanded he mail $189 in cash to a post office box in Panama. Now, here's why that 36-year-old story should matter to you tonight. Every ransomware headline you have read since, the Colonial Pipeline shutting down half the gas pumps on the East Coast, hospitals turning away ambulances, your city's water utility going dark, all of it descends from that one envelope. According to blockchain analysis firm Chainalysis, ransomware victims paid out more than $1.1 billion in 2023 alone. And the man who started it all was not a hacker. He was a Harvard-trained AIDS researcher. This is the untold story of the very first ransomware attack. The 20,000 disks, a mailing list from the WHO conference. To understand how strange this attack was, you have to picture the world it landed in. In December 1989, most homes did not have a computer. There was no World Wide Web, there was no email as you know it, there was no Bitcoin, no dark web marketplace, no hacker forum to coordinate on. So how do you launch a global cyber extortion campaign in a world that barely has the internet? You use the Postal Service. According to CNN Business and confirmed by the Virus Bulletin Archive, roughly 20,000 floppy disks were mailed out from London in plain envelopes. The recipient list was not random. It was lifted from two specific places. 1. Subscribers to the magazine PC Business World. 2. And this is the chilling part. Attendees of the World Health Organization's AIDS conference in Stockholm, doctors, researchers, hospital administrators. People racing to understand a disease that in 1989 was still killing tens of thousands every year. Someone had taken that humanitarian mailing list and turned it into a weapon. The envelopes had real return addresses. They had professional-looking labels. They had detailed installation instructions. To a researcher in Belgium or a clinic in Italy, it looked exactly like the kind of unsolicited but useful information you got in the mail back then. So they put it in the drive, and that, as Eddie Willems would tell CNN 3 decades later, is when their computers stopped being theirs. Boot number 90. The trap inside the AIDS information diskette. Here is what was actually on the disk, in plain English. There was, on the surface, an AIDS risk assessment questionnaire. It worked. It asked you questions about lifestyle and gave you a generic risk score. But while you were answering, the program was quietly rewriting a small startup file on your hard drive. The file your computer reads every time you turn it on. From that moment forward, every time you booted up your PC, the malware kept a secret count. According to the technical analysis published by researcher Jim Bates in Virus Bulletin in January 1990, on roughly the 90th boot, the trap sprang. The program hid your folders. It scrambled the names of every file on your C drive into random characters. And up came a screen demanding payment to PC Cyborg Corporation, COO Post Office Box in Panama. $189 for a 1-year license. $378 for life. Picture it like this. Imagine a locksmith mails you a free puzzle box in the post. Hidden inside is a timer. 3 months later, the box snaps shut around your filing cabinet, and a note appears telling you to wire cash overseas to get the key. That is the AIDS Trojan in one image. Except, as we will see, the locksmith made one mistake. A mistake so basic that within weeks, the entire scheme should have been dead on arrival. Dr. Joseph Popp, the Harvard biologist behind PC Cyborg Corporation, when investigators traced the Panama post office box and the disks back to a single human being, the answer made no sense. According to court records and reporting in The Atlantic and CNN, the man behind PC Cyborg Corporation was Dr. Joseph L. Popp, Harvard-trained, an evolutionary biologist and anthropologist, a consultant for the World Health Organization in Kenya. He had even helped organize a conference in the WHO's new global AIDS program. In other words, the attacker had attacked the exact community he came from. Why would he do that? More than 3 decades later, no one can say for certain. Popp claimed the money was destined for AIDS research itself. Some reports indicate he had been rejected for a job at the WHO. Others suggest a deeper grievance with the field. Eddie Willems, who has spent 30+ years studying this case, told CNN simply, "Even to this day, no one really knows why he did this." What investigators did know was enough to issue a New Scotland Yard arrest warrant on 11 counts of blackmail. And then Popp made his second mistake. He flew home, Brixton Prison and the curlers in his beard. Joseph Popp was detained during a routine baggage inspection at Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport. By the time he reached London, he was being held in Brixton Prison, facing 11 counts of extortion in a foreign court. And quickly he started behaving in ways that, even by 1990 standards, were difficult to interpret. Reporters covering the trial described him wearing curlers in his beard. According to journalist Alina Simone's reporting cited by CNN, He showed up to court with condoms on his nose. In November 1991, a UK judge ruled him mentally unfit to stand trial and sent him back to the United States, where he was never re-prosecuted. He went on to self-publish a book titled Popular Evolution, and before his death in the mid-2000s, he founded a butterfly conservatory in upstate New York. And if you are finding this story as strange as I am, the cybersecurity origin tale that nobody talks about, that is exactly the kind of buried digital history this channel was built on. A subscribe goes a long way toward keeping it alive. Now back to Brixton, because the real plot twist was not Popp's fate. It was the fatal flaw he had baked into his own code, Jim Bates and the free fix, how symmetric encryption doomed PC Cyborg. When researcher Jim Bates pulled the AIDS Trojan apart in late 1989 and early 1990, he found something almost embarrassing. The program used what cryptographers call symmetric encryption. In plain English, that means the same key locks the door and unlocks the door. And Popp had hidden that single key inside the malware itself. By January 1990, Bates had built and released two free tools, AIDS Out and ClearAd, that recovered victims' files without paying a cent. There is no clear evidence Popp ever made meaningful money. The world's first ransomware attack was, financially, a flop. And that should have been the end of ransomware forever. A clever idea, badly executed, defeated by a single researcher with a magazine column. Except the idea did not die. It just had to wait for the rest of the world to catch up. 1996, Young and Young, the academic paper that predicted WannaCry. In 1996, two cryptographers named Adam Young and Moti Young stood in front of the IEEE Security and Privacy Symposium and described, in theory, the ransomware we live with today. Use two keys instead of one, they said. Lock files with a public key, keep the private key on your own server, and the victim can never extract it from the malware itself. Demand payment, they predicted, in a form of untraceable digital cash that did not yet exist. The audience was largely unimpressed. Then, Bitcoin arrived. Then, in 2017, the WannaCry worm tore through hospitals, factories, and railways, infecting more than 300,000 computers across more than 150 countries, with damages estimated by Kaspersky and others at around $4 billion. Then in May 2021, Colonial Pipeline paid roughly $4.4 million in Bitcoin to the DarkSide Group, briefly choking fuel supply across the southeastern United States. And by 2023, Chainalysis was tracking more than $1.1 billion in ransomware payments in a single year. Every one of those attacks runs on the blueprint Popp drew up in 1989, with the flaw that Young and Young quietly fixed in academic obscurity 7 years later. The floppy disk on a living room wall. Eddie Willems still has the floppy disk that infected him. It hangs framed on his living room wall. He told CNN a museum once offered him $1,000 for it. He turned them down, and it is a fitting place for it to end up, because that small piece of plastic is, in a real sense, patient zero for an entire criminal economy. The lesson is not technical, it is human. The first ransomware did not need the internet, did not need cryptocurrency, did not need a criminal network. It needed a mailing list, a printer, and an idea. This story is shared as a historical case study, not a how-to. The goal is awareness, not imitation. Next time, we are going to follow that same thread forward, into the case of the very first SIM swap heist, where attackers learned they did not need to break into your computer at all. They just needed your phone number. I will see you there.